The cabin lights dimmed as the jet soared through the clouds, carrying some of the world's wealthiest passengers. Laughter, champagne, and the quiet hum of luxury filled the air, until a piercing cry shattered the calm. A billionaire's wife had suddenly collapsed, her face pale, her body lifeless. Panic erupted among the crew and elite travelers, yet no one knew what to do. And then, from the very back of the plane, a teenage janitor, someone most passengers had barely noticed, stepped forward. What he did next defied every expectation, changing the course of that flight, and their lives, forever. The jet cruised smoothly through the clouds, its cabin filled with murmurs of laughter, the clink of glasses, and the quiet confidence of people who lived lives of unimaginable luxury. Among them sat a billionaire's wife, elegant and radiant, her smile the kind that drew every gaze. But in a heartbeat, everything changed. Her laughter broke off into a strangled gasp, her body went rigid, and then she collapsed, crumpling into her seat as terror swept across the cabin. Panic rose instantly. Passengers screamed, flight attendants rushed, and the billionaire himself froze in shock, calling out her name with desperation in his voice. Yet for all their wealth, their power, and their privilege, no one seemed to know what to do. Fear gripped the room like a vice. In the far back of the plane, nearly invisible until that moment, a teenage janitor looked up from where he was quietly wiping down a tray. He wasn't supposed to be there, just filling in for a last-minute cleaning duty while accompanying the crew. He had been ignored by the passengers, treated as though he were just part of the furniture, a shadow in their world of wealth. But his eyes widened when he saw the chaos unfold, and something inside him refused to let him sit frozen. Despite his youth, despite the voices telling him he didn't belong in such company, he pushed forward, his heart pounding. As he reached the scene, people looked at him with disbelief. Some even scoffed, questioning what a janitor, barely more than a boy, could possibly do when doctors, assistants, and trained staff hadn't yet taken charge. But he didn't let their doubt stop him. He remembered his late mother, who had once been a nurse, teaching him the basics of first aid when he was just a child. Her words echoed in his head. Sometimes, you have only moments to act, and in those moments, courage can save a life. With trembling hands but unwavering determination, he knelt beside the billionaire's wife. Checking her pulse, he realized she was slipping fast. He tilted her head, cleared her airway, and began chest compressions with the precision he remembered from those lessons long ago. The cabin fell into a stunned silence. Every eye was fixed on him, this teenage boy who dared to act when everyone else hesitated. The billionaire himself stood frozen, torn between fear and awe, watching a boy society had dismissed fight for the life of the woman he loved. Seconds stretched into eternity as compressions gave way to rescue breaths, his face pale with focus, his own breath heavy as he refused to give up. Then, with a sudden gasp, her chest rose. A fragile sound escaped her lips, weak but unmistakable, the sound of life returning. Relief crashed over the cabin in a wave of gasps and tears. The billionaire dropped to his knees, clutching his wife's hand, tears spilling freely. All around, the wealthy passengers who had once looked down on the boy now stared at him with humbled awe. He had done what no one else dared. In that moment, the teenage janitor was no longer invisible. He was the hero who proved that courage, compassion, and the will to act could shine brightest from the most unexpected soul. When the billionaire's wife collapsed, the atmosphere inside the aircraft shifted instantly from luxury and leisure to chaos and dread. People shouted for help, attendants scrambled, and the man who seemed to have everything in the world was left helpless, holding his wife's hand and begging her to wake up. For a few tense minutes, the air was thick with fear and despair. Among the frantic voices, one figure moved forward quietly, an unlikely figure no one had considered important until that very second. It was the teenage janitor, a boy whose presence on the flight was barely acknowledged. He was seen as someone who cleaned up after others, someone who existed in the shadows of wealth and privilege. Yet at that moment, all eyes turned to him as he stepped into the center of the storm. He could feel the weight of disbelief pressing against him. The wealthy passengers whispered, some openly questioning why a janitor thought he could handle something so serious. Their skepticism was sharp, but he refused to shrink back. He knew hesitation could cost a life. His body trembled, but his heart was steady, beating with a fierce determination that came from someplace deeper than fear. He remembered the times he had been overlooked, spoken down to, dismissed as if his life had little meaning compared to those with power and money. But now, none of that mattered. What mattered was the woman fighting for breath before him. Kneeling beside her, he blocked out the voices and focused only on her. He checked her pulse, pressed his ear near her mouth, and felt the terrifying stillness. He began chest compressions, counting under his breath, pushing against the silence that seemed to swallow the cabin. With each push, sweat rolled down his face, but he refused to let exhaustion slow him. When passengers gasped or doubted, he only pressed harder, determined to give her the chance to fight back. His actions weren't driven by skill alone, but by compassion, the kind that comes from knowing the value of life, no matter who you are. As moments dragged by, the passengers who had once judged him for his clothes and his job grew quiet. They could see the raw courage in every movement, the way he gave everything he had for someone he didn't even know. The billionaire, overwhelmed with emotion, could only watch as the boy's courage replaced his own helplessness. When at last the woman's chest rose with a sudden intake of breath, relief erupted like thunder across the cabin. Cheers fell, voices cracked, and people stared in disbelief at the boy who had done the unthinkable. He didn't stand there waiting for applause. He simply leaned back, relief flooding his tired body, knowing he had done what was right. For the first time, the world saw him not as a janitor, not as invisible, but as a human being with courage greater than any fortune could buy. And in that moment, the teenage boy reminded everyone that true greatness has nothing to do with wealth or status. It lies in the heart that dares to act when it matters most.